Good morning. So I don't know if we're going to have yesterday we had an interesting Murphy's Law event that happened during one of our forums. Colonel Slattery was there for it. And I don't know if we're going to have the middle school bell or the ding. But what I do is going to introduce myself. I'm the new Army Capabilities Manager for Electronic Warfare. I'm going into my third week of the job. I'm not going to go back and go with all my experience. I'm going to tell you, though, that I had an interesting conversation yesterday during that discussion with Mr. Dennis Moen. He graciously volunteered to set up the IT equipment for us yesterday and kind of get the 10-year anniversary for cyber panel stood up. And he was a SIGO back during Vietnam, and he did talk about barrage jamming. And, fast forward, thinking about some of the challenges that he described on the battlefield, working in a very congested environment, and kind of thought about it in what I dealt with as a SIGINT/EW platoon leader, because back then it was literally there was no distinguishing the difference. So I thought very humorous that after doing 10 years of cyber, that they would bring me back home to electronic warfare. And I have to say I'm super duper excited, because we are now at a point where we are blowing away Moore's Law, and that not only impacts cyber, but impacts anything that does emit all our information systems, which includes electronic warfare. With me today, also brought in Mr. Ken Strayer. He is our program manager for electronic warfare capabilities, development and fielding. And I'm looking forward to having this exchange with you all. And since I am brand spanking new, while we do still have a lot of the same electronic warfare issues in electromagnetic spectrum, I'm still learning my equipment. So on the front row, I have the resounding Jeopardy champions for electronic warfare. We are ready for the daily double questions. So I'm going to just say, buckle up, Buttercup. We're going to go through this, okay? And please, I know there's going to be questions as we move along. We'll definitely address as we work through. I want to make sure we get time with you all, but then also be gracious to the folks that follow us. Okay, so this letter here, I think, really embodies the problem statement you see in the middle, okay? And this describes our operating environment. As you all know, there are two major conflicts that are going on right now. And so the lessons learned that we are heavily receiving from forward are telling about where we need to take electronic warfare as a transformation and contact force. Russian-Ukraine crisis, that has been very telling. Obviously, there's been big issues with the Russian barrage jamming, but also some of the precision electronic warfare capabilities that they're using for electronic attack. They're also executing electromagnetic protection measures, specifically where their major C2 systems are, maybe large formations strategically on the battlefield. The Russians have over 60 electromagnetic warfare capabilities. And they range everything from a small form factor all the way to something that is, a vehicle-sized system. And it's needless to say, I have to say that adversary electromagnetic warfare capabilities are effective. They are scaled, and they are scalable, and they are ubiquitous. And I think that if anything is telling about what we're facing, what we're seeing with the Russians is only a drop in the pond compared to what we're looking at with our pacing adversary, the PRC. So I want you to think about the battlefield. We're thinking large scale and long range combat operations. So we were just in a hallway, right? It was very congested. It's pretty hot. There's a lot of signals, so your RF floor is elevated. There's competition for a spectrum. We currently are maxed out in our civilian communications here in the United States. So spectrum management is definitely a challenge that we see here just within CONUS in our day-to-day operations. Imagine that on a battlefield in a large-scale combat operation. We also have challenges with data saturation. I do want to share that we do have some good news on that. Our Cyber Technical Warfare Center, they are currently executing an RF data pilot. I was on the RCyber team, just left the RCyber team, but last year, RCyber did conduct a similar data pilot, which was with all DODN A data, and it was a wild success. And it gave us a good trajectory on where we needed to take our data set and how we were going to tackle being able to harness it and leverage it for decision making. Same thing's going to happen with RF data. So, taking you around to the slide, so, that also touches on our computing and data storage challenges. I know you all heard Mr. Garcia, the Army CIO, General Barrett, General Morrison talking about unified network. Electronic warfare data, electronic warfare systems will ride on that same network architecture. And I just left a meeting this morning with Lieutenant General Hodney, and I had the ACOM network lead, Scott McDonald, and then the tactical radios lead, Colonel John Harrell, who has been on the forefront of managing some of our software-defined radios. That network, networks, and specifically software-defined radios will play a major part in the LSCO fight and how we bring in electronic warfare systems into play. Over here at the top, we've always been very heavily focused on our platforms, right? Man, if you're a tank driver, you want your tanks. If you are an artilleryman, you need to have a full-scale range of howitzers on the battlefield. Well, we can't field EW platforms because EW is everywhere. It is pervasive. Remember I mentioned it's ubiquitous with the adversary. We also have to be ubiquitous in how we scale out our EW systems and our capabilities. So we're looking at, we're shifting the focus from platform to payloads. So where I see this heading is going largely more software-defined, and that is depending a lot on our compute and storage. So as we're going through this RF data pilot, I think that's going to be very telling in how we move forward in implementing electronic warfare data and getting it wrapped into the unified network. Because the one thing we do know is the data that we need for decisions out to the forward line of troops on the battlefield that's congested in LSCO, is that transport must be secure, and we need to be able to get the data at machine speed out to that forward line of troops. And then you see right over here, and I did mention that Ken has a Herculean responsibility to address fielding equipment for not only electronic warfare, but also for our intelligence systems, our SIGINT fight, and making sure that our G2 community has what they need to be able to inform commanders on what the adversary's next steps are on the battlefield. And this one right here, down here at the bottom, I like this slide a lot. Reason being is, who all remembers the old IBOS, integration of battlefield operating systems? So this slide this graphic does help me understand, and I hope it helps you all kind of helps describe the way we're going to have to do effective effects pairing of non-lethal electromagnetic capabilities with the kinetic fight. And I was just informed that the clicker is reverse. There we go. So I don't know if y'all remember, but I did say a couple minutes ago that I'm going to my third week in this job, and I don't think it'd be fair to say what's my vision. I think that'd be kind of heavy, but I can tell you where I think things are going to go. So the CSA has been very clear in his expectations that we will fight an electromagnetic warfare fight in LSCO. And so we must rise to that occasion There's been a lot of efforts to address some of the acquisition challenges that we're seeing in the acquisition community. I think Ken, you and I have had multiple conversations about this over the past several weeks, especially during this time frame, and how we can effectively get after fielding the equipment to the forces at the right time. A lot of this is driven by soldiers' requirements. So we are looking and we're rethinking how we execute, they call them soldier touch points. Soldier touch points, this is not your standard DV day, right? This is our ACM EW team sitting alongside soldiers in the field. That's at the CTC rotation. If it is during a Vanguard exercise, a project convergence exercise, it's important that we get a chance to co-locate with the troops that are having to work through electromagnetic challenges in the MSO. That feedback is, we are taking that and it is going right directly back to this team on the very front row. And we also ensure that Ken's team is also receiving the information at the same time. So that way we're not waiting to write a requirement. The requirement writing is dynamic, and it impacts how we are constructing our CDD. There's this beautiful thing called a CDDU, and that U is for update. And so it's critical that as we bring some of these requirements from the field, we have to make sure that we're prioritizing them, because we can't have everything, but we do know that we're going to need some significant capabilities. Everything from at the bottom, you see in theater at the strategic base, all the way out to the forward line of troops. And as you all are tracking, there's a big, especially as a transform and contact force, there's a lot of focus on autonomous systems. So we can expect in the LISCO fight to see a forward line of robots. So what does that mean for EW? I think we can anticipate how we can leverage these capabilities to not only potentially introduce deception on the battle space. There are a range of effects that we are looking that will go from your terrestrial space. So when I'm saying terrestrial, I'm thinking ground, right, all the way up to your air breathers. And so this diagram you see down here at the bottom truly talks through how there's, like, I think over 30 systems on this chart, and Ken is going to go pretty deep on some of these capabilities and where we are in the fielding process. But it's going to be crucial as to how we get data back and forth at machine speed from theater all the way to the division deep fight, right? Where we're focused on those at close range contact instances. I'd have to say that also large-scale combat operations has, you know, the fires. It does have a fire and support coordination line, and I think it's going to be very important where we are addressing that as we are moving out to the tactical edge. So one thing that I want everyone to keep in mind before I turn it over to Ken is we have to get the data right. How we implement our networks, how we implement our systems, how we get data routed, like I said, from the strategic base out to the forward line of troops is going to be critical, because it does have to be at machine speed. We also are looking at how we reprogram these systems, because we're not going to be able to send out an FSR in a large-scale combat operation in the Indo-PACOM theater like we did as well as we did throughout the CENTCOM AOR. So how we are able to leverage systems at machine speed to get to where we're able to do updates on software and firmware in some cases, how we're able to potentially load up a different effect against an adversary, these are all going to be very critical aspects. And you're going to hear Ken describe the PMTX effort, EWPMTX. And I have to say that I think EWPMTX is the bedrock. That is the nexus right there that we're going to have to really focus a lot of efforts on. And I will tell you that I'm very, very happy to work with Lieutenant Colonel Merkel, the APM, on what that looks like and how we're able to leverage EWPMTX for EW mission planning, to be able to leverage ARAT, some DevCom aspect, some DevCom solutions, and then to be able to bring in some new S&T requirements as we're moving along. And this is a fast-paced effort because we're going to have to be fast in order to meet the intent of the CSA and our Transform and Contact mission. I think you're going to see a lot of signals of interest on this battlefield that will be anomalous, and we're going to have to adjust how we attack those. And that goes back to how we can better leverage our software-defined radios and our software, or as much software native solutioning as possible. Also on this battlefield, geometry plays into the fight. It's not just the adversary that gets a vote, but it's also the geometry. And so how we are able to address short, medium, and long-range fires will be critical to the success as we look across all the full spectrum, and then be very dynamic in our targeting and how we're able to use the non-kinetic for shaping efforts to support the kinetic fires. So unless I have any questions about this slide, what I'm going to do is I would like to invite Ken to come on up, and we will talk through some of the systems. And I think we're going to talk through our most recent success is the ManPACs, which you've been instrumental in getting these out forward as quickly as possible. Second Brigade of the 101st is currently experimenting with the ManPACs, a new fresh set, and we're looking forward to hearing some feedback from that brigade, Colonel Schultz and team. So Ken, I'm going to go and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, team. Yeah, I'm Ken Stray. I'm project manager for electronic warfare and cyber. Oh, there we go. It's a great time to be in EW. The department has definitely realized the importance of EW capability for the next fight. We've learned a heck of a lot over the last couple of years, and as I emphasize to my team every day, it's time for us to rapidly transition into delivering capability because we do have a fight on the horizon. What I'd like to do this morning is to lay out for you 5 big ideas that are really going to be kind of the driving priorities and strategy over the next year as we move forward. And if you'd let me walk through these 5, and then I definitely want to save some time for questions at the end. So I'll talk about each of these in a little bit more in depth. The first one is the idea of doing limited prototyping and rapid fielding of mature COTS products. If you were to ask me when I started in this portfolio in 2016, there were not a whole lot of off-the-shelf capabilities. The Army had divested itself from EW. Industry was kind of focused in a different paradigm at the time with the global war on terrorism. But industry has certainly stepped up to the plate and caught up. And today, for any requirement that I end up reading, I can very rapidly identify mature end items, components, and in some cases complete integrated capabilities, which we could rapidly demonstrate, test, and procure. And we're going to do that whenever possible. The pendulum is swinging away from exquisite, complex government-funded development efforts because we just don't need to, and we don't have the time. The second topic is this common distributed hardware software frameworks. Open architectures have been important, and they will continue to be even more important as we drive forward. With dwindling resources, we need to have common architectures across our portfolio where we can rapidly expand, adapt, upgrade these capabilities, and also take advantage of the inherent Army Joint Coalition interoperability that comes along with those predefined open architectures, and I'll talk a bit more about that. The third one is data-centric approaches, and Colonel Gorman mentioned that, how important the data is. What do you need to know? Who needs to know it? When? How fast? Where does it need to go on the battlefield? And that is really the starting point for all of our programmatic designs going forward is what is the data requirements. And you will see as I go into depth of that how we are really building programs around that notion, particularly around the targeting and non-lethal fires key operating system. The fourth there is rapid development of EW techniques and detectors. So we are at the point now where we are fielding kit out on the battlefield, and we know from day one that the threat has a vote, and those threats will modulate very rapidly. The second the shooting starts, wartime modes will kick on, and we have to have the infrastructure in place to rapidly adapt and deliver those updates out to the forward edge, and I'm going to talk about that. And then the last one is AI and ML. Of course, AI and ML will fix all your problems. That's what I've been told. And we are already investing in that area, and I'll expand upon that. So on the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the notion of the rapid fielding mature Scotts products. Here are two examples for you. TLS Manpack, so 12 months from good idea to a fielded product. That is because of the state of industry at the time. When we went into this, we had 6 different mature products, which we got in the hands of soldiers and were able to rapidly evaluate out in field environments, and we're able to coalesce into one product. It is the khaki Mastodon Beast Plus Kraken line, which we've repackaged with the correct comms and data communication mechanisms, and we've titled that the TLS Manpack system. So we are in full fielding today, and this is because of the maturity of the product line and how industry had leaned forward in this key critical area in gaining early user adaptation with multiple Army and joint forces. In the next 12 to 18 months, I'm going to field 30 brigade combat teams with TLS Manpack, and that's just a huge win for our Army. We're really excited about that. S2AS is going to be the next example. This is the situational awareness system, Spectrum Situational Awareness System. It is designated as an FY25 new start, and my goal is to be in fielding in FY25. We're going to move very quickly. In fact, when we did the market research, we knew there was at least a half dozen mature systems out there. This is a spectrum analyzer capability for commanders to understand themselves, integrated with existing Army C2 systems. And again, industry already leaned forward on a lot of this. We had some early adoption from some particular units and commanders. So I today have 3 material solutions in my hands that are going to be going through soldier demonstration and experimentation over the next few months, and we will have a soldier and unit-informed decision on a material approach, and then we're going to buy kit for everybody in the Army over the next couple of years. That's just our good examples of how we're moving fast, and you can continue to see these strategies as we fall into the rest of our New Start programs. The second topic is the Common Distributed Hardware Software Frameworks. You are familiar with a lot of work we have done in the past. We were early adopters into the MOSA CMOS architecture, which is mainly a hardware form factor, a card and a chassis kind of approach that has paid great dividends. We've currently got 4 different programs with CMOS chassis on board. Industry has adopted this standard, and today we can take these predefined software-defined radios or FPGA cards and almost hot swap them between platforms. Takes a little bit of integration and testing, but we've moved what is normally a year to 18-month process down to 4 to 6 weeks to be able to get these capabilities up and operational. Grid may be a new term for you. We used to call it Photon. Photon was the commercial product. Grid is the militarized product. This is our digital signal processing framework. Biggest key it brings to us is how we do memory management of very large caches of data spectrum, and allows a multi-processing for signals. That will continue to be the center of some of our more advanced capabilities. You may be familiar with CFE. The Common Framework Environment is widely proliferated across the Army and Joint Services as a way to do shared techniques and distribute those techniques. Well, the next thing on the horizon is what we're calling A2s, the Advanced Automated Electromagnetic Warfare Suite, A2s. Think of this as your common software framework for EW across the portfolio. We believe the compute hardware should be commercial off the shelf. It's the software framework that we have to settle on so that everyone understands what we are building to, and then we can proliferate that software across our program. So this is the capability to take digitized data and then be able to weed out the signal and to be able to do the advanced analytics on the fly, as well as the machine and the remote system integration that's going to be required on a distributed battlefield. We released on Monday 3 different RFIs to start getting at this problem. One of them was titled A2s or something similar to that. A second one was based on remote, unmanned, or optionally manned devices. These are the remote sensors and effectors that we would distribute on the battlefield. And the third one was to integrate those 2 capabilities into an end item. So RFIs on the street. We're interested to get more feedback from industry. We know in all three of those categories there is already off-the-shelf capability we could buy today. So we want to understand the state of the state, where any of those gaps may reside, and to see how quickly we can move headed into FY25. The next topic is the really converging on software architectures that are data-centric. And a lot of you are familiar with EWPMT. EWPMT is the product that everybody wants but nobody likes, right? It's the EWO and the commander's visualization of the spectrum, to do EW planning, to do some sensor integration and sensor fusion. EWPMT 1.0, EWPMT Legacy, as we're affectionately calling it now, is in full fielding. We are moving full speed ahead and trying to equip the total Army on EWPMT. It's what we have. It works, but it's not good enough, and we recognize that. We got a lot of really effective feedback on this. So we are really rebuilding EWPMT at its core, beginning with its architecture, its underlying data architecture, that again focused on the data-centric piece of this to feed the operational chain and the lethal and non-lethal fires requirements. And we're going to coalesce on the TAC framework. A lot of you are familiar with TAC. Many Army C2 programs and joint programs are already converging on this government-owned framework. We have EWPMT X, as we're calling it. It's being built in-house to the government in collaboration with the Marine Corps for some built-in jointness to its end capability. We just demonstrated the initial version of this down at CyberQuest last month with a lethal kill chain thread, and we're able to spin out the capability on this existing framework for really 20% of what it took us to do the legacy EWPMT. So it's going to be much more agile, much more modular, very quickly be able to link into the joint and Army C2 Next, and also be rapidly adaptable. You'll see I've got a short timeline there as to how in FY25 we're going to continue to build out those threads, and with the goal of FY26 starting to replace EWPMT out in the field with this next generation. Certainly will be informed by soldier and unit feedback, so more to follow there. And then the last topic is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Last month, maybe 6 weeks ago, we released an RFI in partnership with Project Linchpin, which is the Army's effort to get their hands around AI and ML. And Linchpin is really a clearinghouse to be able to drive common processes to validate data, validate models, to provide assurance on the capabilities before we deploy them. So we are partnering with Linchpin. The initial RFIs was to gather some data on how we would go about, and not only what's available in industry today, but how we would go about doing data model training, where the data would come from, how we would curate that data, what kind of IP concerns would we be running into with IA. Because as you can imagine, this could get very expensive and complex very quickly if we just start buying IA models from various vendors. So we have to have some discipline in it, and those strategies are going to be laid in over the next year, and hopefully we'll have some early capability we can also pull out of this to push things into the field. And one of those key things that it's going to support is this idea of rapid reprogramming, because there are certain unknown signals that you want to be able to pull out with AI ML, but there's also going to be other situations where you have to go back and retrain models based on those unknowns, or there are going to be threat signals that are going to require more deliberate development. And when I say deliberate, I'm talking about weeks, not years. But we have to have the architecture and the infrastructure in place to be able to do that, to be able to backhaul those signals, to do the analytics on what it is and what needs to be done with it, and then to have multiple sources to be able to build solutions for detectors and techniques and effectors, whether that's in-house through our reprogramming infrastructure or through industry. There's certainly going to be some hard problems and maybe some off-the-shelf problems we can answer through industry. But also we need the ability for soldiers to be able to reprogram at the forward edge because of the timeliness. This is one of the lessons learned that we got feedback from Ukraine. We sent them some early capability in their current fight, and their immediate response was that they wanted to do reprogramming at the forward edge. And we ran into some challenges to that because we weren't set up to do that, and also working with foreign nations in theater became a real challenge. So we're going to implement that this year. We're calling our end of it, the material solution of it is Arsenal. Arsenal will provide not only the repository, the secure repository to maintain all the techniques and detectors, so that soldiers can do lookups to understand what's available, try to find matches on existing capability or capability that can be tailored for what they need at the forward edge. And then this will also provide the linkage from Sanctuary back to the forward edge of the battlefield and directly into the systems to be able to upload rapidly those techniques. We were on a campaign to demonstrate this over the next couple of years, but when I found out we were fielding 30 brigades of Manpack next year, I realized that we got to have this in place now. So we're going to go full speed ahead and have this in place by next summer. That's our goal. And with that, how did I do? Oh, we got a half hour. All right. I don't know. Should we go sit down at the table? You want to stand up here? What do you do? You guys, your time. Open your questions.
Good afternoon, sir. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Torrey from the Army National Guard. So currently, we're on track to have 47% of the EW force structure by FY28 in the Army National Guard. Of that, we currently have 5 different units that have EW personnel deployed for 3 different theaters. So my question is, we've had EW personnel in Army National Guard since 2008. We have yet to receive a single program of record or rapid fielding initiative at all. So we have soldiers buying equipment off of Amazon to be equipped. So what can we do for, like you said, leading from the edge? And I was instructed by HQDA during the EW working group that the 30 brigades do not include any from the National Guard. So if you have different information for that, I would be very happy to know.
Yeah, a couple of comments on that. First of all, I don't drive fielding plans, right? That comes from HQDA G357 and their priorities, and also for QRCs, rapid fielding, of course, you probably know how that works. You can write the requirements all day long, but it requires funding, so that's a pretty constrained way to do it. I just got off the phone with G8 this morning, and because we got this plus up for Manpacks that just came through this week, and this is a total Army fielding plan. We have the same challenge with EWPMT. I'm fielding more EWPMT than I have an official fielding plan. Don't tell G8 that if anyone's in the room. But tell me where and when, and we'll be there, right? And EWPMT is available for self-deployment. All you need to do is go buy it's a high-end, but it's a commercial laptop by yourself, self-deployment, Manpack. We'll be ready to go here next year. The rest of it, yeah, it's not moving nearly fast enough, right? And like I mentioned when we kicked off, we did some learning here. You're probably familiar with a lot of the other programs I didn't talk about here, TLS, MFU, some of those other programs. We made some advances. We learned a lot. We got a lot of feedback from the ongoing operations in Ukraine and needs in the Pacific, and we had to recock some of that. And so we're looking at ways to go faster. And I think what I talked about with A2s and this software architecture is going to enable us to get kit out the door, and in some cases even faster than force structure, because there are some force structure challenges even in Compo 1 that we're dealing with right now. So, I don't know. You have anything to add?
No, it's thank you, because I told Ken this morning that you and I interfaced. And so I want you to know that Compo 2 and Compo 3 are definitely on our minds. You guys are part of the cyber family, and so natural move is to get you guys equipped as well, so that way you guys can fight alongside. Thank you for the question. Hey, good morning, Sergeant Major.
Are you guys, so AI, right, requires tons of data sets to really perform. So where are you absorbing this data from to ensure that this AI isn't making the wrong complicated decision?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
You can stay up there, Sergeant Major. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to pass off my battle buddy over here. This is a very passionate area for myself, and I have on the front row with me Mr. Steve Rain, the director of the Technical Warfare Center. So I think what I see, and I wish I could stand up because I'd probably start dancing around, because I do get excited about this. When I said we have to get the data locked in and a path forward, I mentioned the unified network platform piece. And you probably heard Gabriel Nimbus before, yes? Okay. So I think what we're looking at, and I'm not an architecture person, but I think there's some looking at cloud. I think there's some hybrid solutioning as well. I think unified network is going to be a lot of drivers of that. I don't know if I want to give a sneak preview of what I think is in my mind, but I think what we're going to have to look at is there is something to the left of GN, right, where the data will come in. So you will have your detectors whenever they identify a signal, and when it comes into the networks, right, how we are able to bring that data in, have it processed, what the classifiers look like, right? Because we have a way of being able to establish communities of interest, so that way we can ensure that the Intel community gets what they need, but then the EW community gets what they need. I think you're going to see a lot more of this data being aligned to fires and your maneuvers, right? Because there's going to be a critical aspect of that, because that's going to go into fires planning and how we execute short range, mid range, and that long range fight. But right now, I anticipate a lot of this RF data study. I think we're going to get a lot of good answers. I know that Colonel Elmo, Dave, you here? He's right there. So what we're looking at is we're also trying to identify the data types, right? Modulation, waveform. It's not just lat longs, right? There's a whole lot of other aspects to EW information that we need to ensure that we have a good understanding. Because that's also going to drive some of the classification aspects and how we ensure that we get the data routed properly.
Yeah, and sorry, Major, you hit the big problem with AI right on the head there. It's the data, and that's what we're concerned about. So a lot of the models that we see out there today that we can get from industry are based on commercial data, right? It's commercial signals, which is what's available. Of course, the hard targets are all classified data that has to be collected and curated. That some of that does exist today, but a lot of it's in the Intel channels. And one of our ground rules is that we want to stay out of the SIGINT production chain, because we want to keep the classification down for joint coalition interoperability, which means we need different data tagged in different ways. So that is where we are in the journey right now. It's one of the questions we have with the RFI. And Linchpin is there to help us to validate that data, because the last thing you want is a model that's built on bad data, or a model that works one day but then it's ingesting data and it morphs into something that's no longer effective. So there has to be some rigor and some level of control so that we have surety on what we're deploying.
That was a good question. I am gonna give a shout out to my predecessor. I'm gonna channel my inner Gary Brock here and tell you that your 13 series, who is on the line, that's trying to deliver the right artillery, the right munition at the right time, they don't care what that payload is on there. They just make sure that it's effective, depending on the type of effect. Oh, no, this is a good question.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I tell you the data, step one is defining what data, right? And where's it coming from? What do you need? From an acquisition perspective, it's how do I get that data off the forward edge? Where do I store it? How do I get access to it given the limited pipes we have? In a bandwidth constrained environment, what needs to be pushed back? What can be done locally? Those are all questions we got to figure out here real quick.
And I will tell you also, just to reinforce, because you are spot on, Sergeant Major. Had a conversation yesterday, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you about this. But so I don't know if you heard Mr. Garciga's keynote speech on Monday, because at the DA level, to your point, AI is expensive, and it'll if you do not have the right questions if you do not have a very specific question or requirement to ask, that drives up the cost. That whole compute and store stuff that I talked about on the front side, it is the premature adoption of AI solutions will literally bankrupt if you're not careful. And so Colonel Landon from NetCom, he's actually going up to the Office of Army Analytics. He's a data scientist, and he posed a question. He goes, "Hey, we're looking at maybe we can do some experimentation. So no promises, but I did speak to Colonel McAteer at 35th Signal Brigade, and what I'm interested in is, so one facet is spectrum management. Okay, I'm very interested in seeing if we can maybe tighten up a question or a requirement for spectrum management to see if we can take a look at what Colonel Landon's efforts would be, because he did pose a good question. But I think to see if we can get things moving along, because like Ken described earlier, we're going to have to go a bit faster. But I want to be very deliberate in how we approach that. So I'd have had some preliminary conversations. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hi, how you doing? Patrick Bell. When you talk about data and what's the right type of data, it seems like other services have solved this like 20 years ago. Like you go out to the Navy, you go to JADO where they do jammer optimization, they have the databases, they're using AI/ML. Are you guys partnered with them to solve this problem, or at least learn from them, and then bring that back to the Army and work with ARAT? Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, it's a loaded question there, right? Yeah, we are partnering with them. I tell you, it's a different operating environment and different. Yeah, I mean, one of the models that we keep coming back to is how they do things with like F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, and it seems like they've got their processes in place, but then when we try to overlay them on the way the Army operates in our constrained distributed environment, things become very complex very quickly. So there's definitely some lessons to be learned there.
I will tell you that I did get a chance to hang out with the Navy before I came into the job, and we have all these, the Jeopardy guys I just mentioned earlier. A lot of these guys are retired Navy EWOs. Navy has it; they're very good at what they do when it comes to electromagnetic warfare, and we are having discussions about requirements and capabilities. To your point, I don't know that AI/ML is as prolific across the OD as a lot of people think.
No, it's not. It's in pockets. But
Right.
There's people solving the same problems, and they're quite frankly ahead of us.
If you
It
have
seems
some,
like the Army kind of tries to reinvent the wheel on this. So,
I would love to hear. So I would love to meet after this and talk with you about your POCs, because to your point, it is not. I'm all about not trying to greenfield this approach. It takes some lessons learned, and you have Mr. Ryan's rapt attention, because I'm sure he's also trying to solve this from the TWC perspective. Yes, yeah. Anyone else have any questions? These are some good questions.
Army Administrator.
Hey there.
Major Flip Clunk, our cyber. So we talked about policy, schema, infrastructure, data sharing with partners and allies. A lot of the forward progress in technology is being made, but what are the gaps do you think still need to be tackled? And who do you think might be some of the best organizations or people to help with some of those gaps?
I had that answer. That's a good one, thanks. So last week we did get a chance, Kim mentioned the FIRB, the review that we conducted last week. In that review, we essentially arrived at the conclusion that we need to do a capabilities-based assessment, a CBA, for electronic warfare, and had a briefing this morning with AFC, where Mr. Russ Fenton, who will be spearheading the CBA, pretty much laid it out for for the AFC, for General Hodney on why we needed to do this, because to your point, we have to go really fast against a wicked problem. And there are several gaps. There was the Star Blazer study that happened, was it last year? A couple of years ago, where really it was taking a look at the .mlpf and addressing and identifying the gaps. And I want to say there was like 72 gaps that were identified. I think 24, not very good at math in public, forgive me. I think 24 of those gaps were addressed, but we still have several hanging chads that have to be managed and worked through. And so a fun fact that I heard today that was not tracking, that apparently CBAs are supposed to be updated every year. And so we are right and on time to tackle this one for electromagnetic warfare. So I think you're going to see us taking a harder look at some of the gaps that came out of Star Blazer and see where we are in the movie at this point and where we are with the equipment that's being fielded to Ken's point and going forward. And it's a teaming effort. It's not going to be just RID. It'll be the capabilities management team for EW. I imagine it'll probably be our cyber, you guys as well, because we got to get this right, and it's a holistic solutioning that we're going to have to do to address gaps and really fast.
Yeah, and from an acquisition perspective, I mean, we always have technology challenges, right? Besides AI, ML, things like quantum apertures, faster processors, SDRs, things of that such. But I'm most concerned with asking industry to lean forward on the new requirements that are emerging. I left some books out on the back table there. There's only a handful of them, but in the back there are some pending New Start programs for FY26 and 27, which I didn't talk about today, as well as a short list of technology. And as I mentioned, we would really like to lean towards buying off-the-shelf products, right? Things that are mature and ready to go, or at least close to the requirement. A couple of those that are in the back of that book, we've talked about before, are things like MEMS and NISO and CSR, if you're familiar with that product line. MEMS is probably the best example. That just got accelerated from 27 to 26, so we now have funding in 26, and I hope to buy some off-the-shelf products in 25 to pre-position them. If industry wants to be successful, you're going to have a low-cost, a treatable sensor that we can put out on the battlefield to obscure and obfuscate the spectrum. And don't plan on me spending a lot of R&D dollars on it, because I expect industry to come with a product to the table that we can go buy lots of and deploy quickly. So that's kind of the unfinished work that we have on the road ahead.
And I want to just tag on that one. We are working across the other capabilities managers. So especially the high altitude guys, there's a big look at NISO and how we're very heavily focused on shaping that requirement now. I know Kirk Hawk, who is our air lead right there, leaning forward, him and Stern First Class Mac. Actually, Stern First Class Mac is getting a chance to go out to South Dakota to go take a look at some high-altitude balloon capabilities to see if we can better shape up our requirements. So we're working across the ACMs to make sure we are locked shoulder to shoulder on our requirements and able to, and I think that's where we're able to get faster at this, right? It is that collaborative approach to help, one, reduce duplicative efforts, but then also ensure we're able to get the capability out that the troops need.
And we didn't really talk about launched effects and unmanned systems that much here either. That's because I think really the way the Army strategy toward that, launched effects specifically, the PEO Aviation is responsible for the airframes. There's another PM in my organization that does some of the payloads. But our strategy for deploying remote payloads on optionally manned air and ground capabilities is going to be critical to the future. We just need to do a better job of describing our strategy in the way ahead, but we definitely need investment in that area. And some of the things that keep me up when I think through this is particularly like attritable systems, like you think of MEMS or some of these unmanned sensors where you're going to have to leave them behind. You want enough capability out there to do what it needs to do, but yet you can't have CPI in there, right? Critical program information, because you know that's going to fall into the enemy's hands. And that's a problem. So what's good enough? And the same thing with communications. I got to be able to communicate, but I can't have $100,000 BLOS radio in there, right? Or SATCOM radio. So how do we backfill and data? Those are all hard problems that I think will mature on over the next few years.
Yeah, I think you just touched on really reprogramming and how we can get after reprogramming to be able to quickly zero out something, but then also
Right.
that dynamic
Or update it once it's out there.
Yeah, and then I think also the dynamic reassignment with S2AS and spectrum management. You're not only looking at Blue Force communications, but you're looking at adversary communications, and I think there's some critical aspects that bringing that into AWPMTX will help in the dynamic environment we're talking about.
We can't leave till Dave Lockhart asks this question. No question. I've never been in a briefing where Dave Lockhart was there and he didn't have a question, but okay. Because you retired? Good. Thanks, Dave. All right. I'm sure if there's no more questions, Colonel Gorman and I will hang out here a little bit afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it.